Hey, what's happening? This is Isai Rodriguez, host of the Deficient podcast, where I cater to the professional working man, 40 and above, who's looking to make positive changes to his health, lose weight, and become stronger overall through simple lifestyle changes. I'm here to share inspiration, tips, and proven lessons that I've personally learned and lived through in my 40 plus years on this here beautiful blue planet. So today we'll start the discussion off by talking about how to tell the difference between needing something and wanting something in our first segment. And then we'll move on to our second segment and talk about, is there a connection between vitamin D and weight gain? And before I get into that, if you'd like to continue the conversation, then get on over to podcast.dasplanation.com/VIP to get on the VIP Insiders community, where I share more entertaining, behind the scenes stories, tips, and hacks that'll keep you feeling younger each and every day. That's podcast.dasplanation.com/VIP. Again, that's podcast.dasplanation.com/VIP. Be in the know starting right now. Also, don't forget to rate me on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you're listening to this episode right now, and leave me a nice, fat, juicy 5-star review and some absolutely beautiful words of why you love the show so much. It really helps me get the word out, and it's honestly the one place where your vote truly matters. And now, let's move into our first segment with Healthy Conversations. So in this week's iteration of Healthy Conversations, we're talking about how you can tell the difference between needing something and wanting something. Like, so the next time you have like the urge to check your phone or have a second cocktail, you might not enjoy it as much as you think you will. Because here's the thing. So, as anyone who counts on a 3-year-old amongst their, acquaintances, like, they can tell you that there's really something to be said about the will of this small child that's really hard to fight, to really dispute, and to get past. So for instance, like, once my son realizes that there's, let's say, ice cream in the freezer and he decides that, he wants some ice cream for dessert, listen, there's no stopping him or his attempts at getting at that ice cream, Me trying to reason with my son is like an ineffective UN diplomat who's attempted to persuade like a major nation state to, stockpile fewer weapons, like, come on, good luck with that, But a lot of times he gets the ice cream and then basically decides to let the damn thing melt before he even eats it. Like sometimes he even puts it down and forgets about it altogether. You know what I mean? It's crazy because from what I can tell, he wants the ice cream, and badly. Like he wants it with every ounce of being at that very moment. But apparently he doesn't like it so much so that some other absorbing activity can't remove it from him. Like he doesn't want it to the point that something else can't rob his attention for a minute or long enough for him to decide, you know what? Now I don't want it, And it's kind of funny because I only truly grasp this concept and realize how it applies to me when I came across the findings of a study of coffee drinkers reported on the Research Digest blog. So this caught my attention, obviously, first of all, because, well, I'm a coffee drinker. I love coffee, and I've said this before, that's one of my biggest vices. And so, it grabbed my attention right off the bat. So I was like, hey, what are they talking about on this blog? And the study that they were talking about was pretty simple and, straightforward. Using various psychological tests, researchers found that quote unquote heavy drinkers, those consuming 3 or more cups per day, which I generally don't get into that. I don't fall into that category only because I make the conscious effort not to. But this, the researchers found that these heavy drinkers had a much greater desire for coffee than those who consumed less of it or none. But even, despite all of that desire to drink the coffee, as far as the amount of pleasure that they received from the actual drinking of the coffee, as it turns out, it turns out that they had about the same amount of pleasure when compared to light drinkers. They found similar connections with the more serious addictions to alcohol or hard drugs. That's something to think about. There was a similar split between wanting and liking. You want the substance more and more, but like it less and less. And it's also been demonstrated or shown that if you deprive people of a prize that they want, if you hold it back or you keep them from what they want, they'll want it or desire it even more. Yet if they do eventually get that prize, it'll lose some of its value. You know what I mean? So that initial want to have something makes the prize even better. You want it even more, but once you get it, it kind of loses something, It's now that you got it, all right, what do I do with it? I got it, I had it, I consumed it, it's good, I'm satisfied, And that ancient idea that what we desire isn't necessarily what we enjoy, this has gotten a lot of support from modern neuroscience. These studies like this one that I'm talking about, it shows that the two processes, if you will, involve distinct circuits in the brain, without breaking out the actual science terminology. But there's a chemical, a so-called pleasure chemical in your brain called dopamine, and it's probably better understood as the desire chemical, which can be triggered in huge quantities in the near total absence of pleasure. So your brain, simply said, your brain could essentially be experiencing zero pleasure at any given moment. And within an instant, in the snap of a finger, blink of an eye, just like that, your brain can be flooded with dopamine. Now, for me, this is clearest, or crystal clear, I should say, with the effects of social media. Think about this. So within seconds after giving into that desire to log on to Facebook or Instagram, I'll realize once again that I won't be having any fun here, I use it more as a business tool than anything else, I don't necessarily socialize on social media. And not to veer off topic too far, but having said that, not necessarily socializing on social media, it's funny to find, when I do actually socialize a bit, it's funny to find out how many people or how many antisocial people are on social media. Come on, people, we're on there to socialize. That's why it's called social media. But I don't know. Well, listen, that being said, this makes evolutionary sense too, So follow me here. So from your genes point of view, it's helpful that things like sex or eating a meal rich in sugar and fat, it's helpful that those things should be pleasurable. But what's really critical is that they're alluring, that they're attracting to, they draw you in. They make you desire them. It's much more important that you should want them rather than the fact that you enjoy them once you get them. Because all of the sex, eating sugar or fat rich foods, these things help our species survive, and reproduce. So it's critical that you should want them, like your body should crave them, you know? But keeping this distinction in mind as you cautiously go through your day can actually be surprisingly empowering. You know what I mean? Like there's at least a chance that you'll remember the next time you're gripped by that urge to check your phone or have a second cocktail or say something mean to someone. It's a really good chance that you might not enjoy it as much as you predicted, like as you thought that you would enjoy it. It's not that desire needs to be squashed completely. It simply needs to be understood as a, not useful guide to an enjoyable life. Wise or not, I've also found myself surrendering to my son's demands even more often than not. That way those feelings of wants, they'll arise and move through him quickly, like a passing storm basically. And soon enough, we're back to enjoying ourselves, like our company, it's a lot easier than trying to fight the weather. And it'll just be easier for the both of you, or the both of us, really. So anyway, the more you know, the better you'll be. And so with all that said and done, let's switch gears and move on to our second segment, Mighty Man. So in this installment of Mighty Man, we're discussing the question, is there a connection between vitamin D and weight gain? So first off, vitamin D, also known as the sunshine vitamin, is nothing more than a hormone that your body produces when your skin is exposed to the sun. So you can also get some vitamin D from, your diet, but there's, there are few foods that actually contain enough vitamin D for it to make any kind of difference. And even with all that, exposure to the sun and diet alone aren't enough. So, experts estimate that around 50% of people worldwide have less than optimal levels of vitamin D running through their bodies, and up to 1 billion with a B, experience vitamin D deficiency. So, guess what your odds are that you're deficient in vitamin D? But here's the thing. Maintaining these optimal levels of vitamin D is crucial for the health of your bones, your brain, and your immune system. It's also been suggested that getting the right amount of vitamin D into your body can help prevent unwanted weight gain. So, people who are overweight or considered obese are more likely to have low vitamin D levels when you compare them with people whose weight, fall within the quote-unquote the normal range. This little fact has caused some professionals to suggest that low vitamin D levels may cause weight gain. So that's where this little, weight gain thing comes into play. And I suppose that's a reasonable assumption, but a few studies seem to support this theory. So in one study, men and women were given 25 micrograms of vitamin D or a placebo each day for 12 weeks. So there were two groups essentially of men and women. One group was given 25 micrograms of vitamin D and the other group a placebo. And by the end of the study, the people in the vitamin D group lost almost 6 pounds of fat compared with the placebo group, who only lost about 1.1 pounds. And the people in the vitamin D group also gained 3 pounds more muscle than those in the placebo group. And the funny thing was that there were no significant changes in waist sizes or the total body weight. So the weight didn't go up or down, the waist size didn't go up or down, but it was found that the people that were taking the vitamin D gained muscle. So obviously, if you understand how the body works, if you're losing muscle, if you're gaining muscle but your weight is not going up, obviously you're gaining muscle but losing fat. You know what I mean? Which makes sense because muscle burns fat. And actually, in a recent review of 11 weight loss studies, the findings suggested that supplementing with 625 to 15,000 micrograms of vitamin D monthly for 1 to 12 months may reduce your overall BMI and your waist size in people who are considered overweight or obese. But the reality was that these changes were very small and no significant differences in total body weight were noted, as we mentioned earlier. And so like currently, like the most researchers, like they believe that the power of vitamin D levels observed in people with again overweight or obesity may be explained by other factors. So there's like, you know, other things involved here, you know? So for instance, since vitamin D is stored in fatty tissues, people with larger amounts of body fat, like they may need larger amounts of vitamin D, you know, to maintain their blood levels similar to people of lower weight. Also, people with overweight or obesity may also spend less time outdoors or eat less vitamin D rich foods or vitamin D fortified foods, you know what I mean? Like, because that's basically their lifestyle. So because of situations like these, experts suggest or have suggested that people who are considered to be quote unquote overweight, and if you go by like by that chart that you find like online and stuff like that, like I'm technically overweight myself at just over 210 pounds and 5'10". So I'm right there with you guys. But people like us that are people that are considered overweight, we might need 1.5 times more vitamin D than people with normal BMI, or, you know, people that are in that normal, quote unquote, normal weight class. Whereas people who are considered obese, which are obviously people over that, these people may require 2 to 3 times more. So basically twice as much as people that are overweight, and basically 3 times more than normal people or people in that normal range. You know, sometimes I wish some of my own family would listen to me, but it's like holding up a $10 bill straight up against your face. It's not until you pull the $10 bill away from your face that you notice it's a $10 bill, you know? Same with my family. They're too close to me to actually take my advice. But this is so true. So anyway, how do you know if you're vitamin D deficient? It's a great question, you know? Because it's not typically associated with any noticeable symptoms unless your deficiency is really bad, you know? So most people don't even know they're deficient until they have a blood test that catches it, you know? And it's kind of important to know if you're deficient in vitamin D, because this prolonged deficiency can lead to things like bone pain or deformities, rickets, which is like a weakening of the bones. It can lead to seizures. It can lead to muscle spasms, dental abnormalities, or even heart problems. So if you recognize any of these symptoms or several of them, then make sure to talk about them with your doctor to rule out a vitamin D deficiency. And even though a deficiency can affect anyone, certain groups of people may be at a greater risk. So for instance, people who have had gastric bypass surgery may not be able to properly absorb vitamin D from their diet alone. You know, it's bad enough that we don't get enough vitamin D from our diet, but if you had this gastric bypass, you have even more of an issue absorbing vitamin D. And because of the nature of this surgery, it puts them at a higher risk of developing a deficiency. This also seems to be true for people with celiac disease, people with short bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel disease, cystic fibrosis, or chronic pancreatic insufficiency. Say that 3 times fast. Like, I had to write these down because if you fall in these categories, like people who fall into these categories are also at a higher risk of developing a vitamin D deficiency. But that's not all. Those aren't the only people, you know, like older adults, as well as those who have been blessed with darker skin tones or who spend little time outdoors. These people may also be at an increased risk of deficiency because of their inability to effectively produce enough vitamin D from sun exposure alone. And finally, some prescription medicines accelerate the breakdown of vitamin D, which in itself can increase the risk of developing a deficiency. So if you suspect you may have low vitamin D levels, then consider getting your blood levels tested to rule that out. Actually, speaking of blood tests, doctors generally recommend that you get your vitamin D levels tested twice a year, once in the spring and once again in the fall time. This twice a year approach can really help you evaluate your current vitamin D levels in relation to your sun exposure so that, you can tailor your vitamin D intake or supplementation accordingly. And while we're talking about that, there are many ways to improve your vitamin D levels. The first and best way is through sun exposure. Your body can produce this vitamin from cholesterol when your skin is exposed to UVB sun rays. So according to experts, exposing around 40% of your skin for at least 20 minutes to the midday sun without wearing sunscreen, obviously, this amount of sun exposure is enough sun time for most people to produce a sufficient amount of vitamin D. But if you've been blessed, again, with darker skin complexion, or maybe living more than in an area of the globe that's more than 35 degrees above or below the equator, then you might find it hard to produce enough vitamin D from the sun alone. And there's other influencers that contribute here. These other influencers that you might want to keep in mind are things like local smog levels, if you live in a highly congested city, of course, obviously. Things like cloud cover, obviously if it's cloudy out all the time, you're not going to get as much sun ray, the altitude, as we mentioned, or not the longitude, the altitude. So if you live on, in Colorado, which is there's a lot of mountains and stuff like that. If you live on a mountain or somewhere where it's mountainy, this recommendation may not work for you, or might, this may influence the amount of UVB rays that you get. And even the season of the year can all it can play a role in your absorption of UVB rays. And now, don't take this advice and go sunbathing. Don't start going sunbathing for a few hours a day, because most dermatologists warn against excessive sun exposure. Well, because of the increased risk of skin cancer linked to this excessive UV radiation. There's always a gotcha, if you ask me, and this is kind of a double-edged sword, if you ask me. And all these reasons make it important to ensure you include vitamin D rich foods or vitamin D fortified foods into your diet. So some examples would be fatty fishes or mushrooms, fortified dairy or plant-based milks. Eggs are a great example. Liver, if you're into that, or other meats. I know liver is a good one. Not that liver is good, but it's a good source of vitamin D. And if you're not able to maintain a good amount of vitamin D through sunshine and diet alone, then a supplement that can provide anywhere between 800 and 4,000 international units of vitamin D, or how they abbreviate it as IU, then a supplement might be needed. Actually, if you'd like a recommendation on a nice, high quality vitamin D supplement, then sign up for my VIP community. I'm always sharing things that I've found over the years that have literally saved me from countless ER visits and endless doctor appointments and all sorts of medication that you just don't need if you just get your hands on the right stuff, the good stuff, right from the beginning, and then use them religiously. Anyway, enough of that. If you want to live past 100, get on my VIP community. Otherwise, just enjoy all the free tips and advice right here on the podcast. So anyway, the bottom line here here is we started off asking the question, does vitamin D cause weight gain? And, this is pretty much, it's a simple question, and the answer is equally simple, The answer is no. A vitamin D deficiency is unlikely to cause weight gain. But on the flip side, it may cause other health problems or unpleasant symptoms, which are certainly worth avoiding if you ask me. You can also maintain your vitamin D levels through a combination of limited sun exposure, a diet that's rich in vitamin D, and by taking quality vitamin D supplements. And as I suggested earlier, if you suspect that your body is not producing enough vitamin D, then listen, you should seriously consider getting your blood levels tested to rule it out, because it is important. Again, it's not gonna cause you to gain weight, but there's a lot of other health problems and that are associated to vitamin D deficiency. So get yourself tested. Know your numbers, because once you do, then you can improve. You know what I mean? And so, with all that said and done, that's it, you guys. That's my show for today. I hope you found some valuable information here. If nothing else, I hope I've entertained you for a few minutes and was able to bring you a little manly sunshine to your day. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to listen to me. It's very much appreciated. On next week's episode, we'll be tackling the topic of how to be a superhero in bed. So fellas, when I say you don't want to miss out on that, I mean it. You definitely don't want to miss out on that. And if you'd like to continue the conversation with me, then get on over to podcast.dasplanation.com/VIP to get on the VIP Insiders community, where I share even more raw behind the scenes stories, tips, and hacks that'll keep you feeling younger and younger each and every day. That's podcast.dasplanation.com/VIP. Again, that's podcast.dasplanation.com/VIP. Be in the know starting right now. Also, don't forget to rate me on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is that you're listening to this episode right now. And leave me a nice, fat, juicy 5-star review and some absolutely beautiful words of why you love the show so much. It really helps me get the word out, and it's honestly one place your vote truly matters. Till the next chat, take care now. Bye.